All right, moving on to expansion that has not been announced or formally indicated in any way by Disney. Um, I want to start at Disneyland Park specifically, and with Disneyland, I think there are two elephants in the room that I want to address before getting into expansion into the parking lot, the surface parking lots. Um, those elephants being one, Fantasyland, and two, Tomorrowland. So with Fantasyland, I think it's pretty inevitable that we'll see an expansion someday. Um, Ideally, in my opinion, obviously, I should preface this with that because, Fantasyland and Tomorrowland are next to each other. Um, there is quite a sizable plot of real estate that Disney can utilize for, expanding and building new attractions on their current plots. Um, I think with Fantasyland specifically, we would see the Autopia area and um, the Fantasyland theater tent behind the Storybook Canals and Casey Junior Train. I think we would see Fantasyland expansion utilize those two uh, spaces. And with Autopia, I think it kind of really makes sense for Frozen to go into this area. Um, for one, I think it makes a lot of sense and fits naturally and aesthetically behind the Matterhorn Mountain, being a Nordic franchise and atmosphere. I think it kind of would be a seamless fit and transition to have the Matterhorn um, kind of frame a frozen Arendelle land. Um, Another reason why, I mean, apart from Frozen being just an incredibly lucrative franchise and brand for Disney, um, there are two Frozen. There are two sequels on the way with Frozen 3 and 4 coming in the coming years, and Disney has already built several Frozen lands around the world. So they've already done the research and development and design for the main water based attraction for Frozen, as well as the bay and whatnot. So I think it would be fairly practical and relatively easy for Disney to transplant one of the Frozen lands that they've built around the world. I think from what I've heard, either the Frozen land that's in Tokyo Disney Sea's Fantasy Springs or in Hong Kong Disneyland, I think either of those two would be probably ideal. I have heard that the Frozen land that also just opened this year in Disneyland Paris's Disney Adventure World Park, which is a rebrand of their Hollywood Studios Park, um, or the Walt Disney Studios Park, excuse me. Um, I've heard that that Frozen Land in Paris is kind of a slightly reduced version of what they have in Hong Kong and Tokyo. So I would prefer the version in Tokyo. I believe that has a more extravagant dark ride, and the animatronics are truly next level, next generation. Like the actuators and the face look like an animated movie has come to life. So I would really love that level of attraction coming to Fantasyland. I think it's kind of desperately needed at Disneyland. We only have really kind of like some of the older dark rides. We don't have a next generation dark ride for a fantasy themed IP like Frozen or Another pick that I would really love, and this could probably be in the theater area, the Fantasyland Theater, which sits between the Casey Jr. and Storybook Canals and Toontown, would be Tangled. I think a Tangled area, a little Tangled mini land, so to speak, could be really spectacular. Similar also to what they've done with Tangled in Fantasy Springs at Tokyo Disney Sea. And I think they've also, um, the new Tangled attraction that's kind of like a spinner flat ride in Disneyland Paris's Disney Adventure World expansion. That is also a pretty really well done ride. So either a flat ride similar to that Tangled spinner, or a more traditional boat ride, dark ride akin to what they have in Tokyo Disney Sea, I would really love to have brought to Disneyland's Fantasyland. And then the other elephant in the room obviously is Tomorrowland, and to be honest, this is a entire other conversation that needs to be had with respect to Tomorrowland, just because of how important it is to Disneyland and the Disney company in general. I think fans have been really longing for decades for a revitalization of Tomorrowland, and so I want to dedicate a whole video to that. In short, I would really love for Disney to redo Space Mountain. I would love, you know, other IPs such as like Wally or Big Hero 6 or Wreck-It Ralph, to be brought to Tomorrowland to revitalize and bring a new um, energy to the land. I think also some of the existing attractions, such as Star Tours and the old Captain EO Theater underneath Space Mountain, as well as the Star Wars Launch Bay slash America Sings slash old Carousel of Progress building, have got to go, and we deserve and frankly need brand new e-ticket attractions to replace a lot of the existing attractions in Tomorrowland. So there are plenty of ideas. Again, that can be its whole other video, so I want to dedicate one to that. So with that, those are the two main elephants in the room with respect to the current Disneyland park, that I think are worth mentioning when we're talking about expansion at Disneyland. And so with that, I want to transition over to the Lilo and Stitch parking lot. Looking at the west side of Disneyland Park, where we could see expansion into the Lilo and Stitch parking lot, um, essentially what we would see is at the end of the Bayou Country area beyond Tiana's Bayou Adventure, um, we could see either tunneling or just direct access over Disneyland Drive onto the Lilo and Stitch parking lot. So this would be the first time, or not really the first time, because um, Toontown and Galaxy's Edge both exist outside of the original berm that Walt Disney built for Disneyland. So this would just be another expansion beyond the berm and train tracks, where essentially we would be going from Bayou Country into this new land area. One major important part of this expansion that I think is pretty clear from what Disney has shared with their plans for Disneyland Forward, but they haven't said outright explicitly is that I believe that there will be a new esplanade and entrance, an entryway, exit and entrance to both Disneyland and Disney California Adventure on this new plot of land. So if you can imagine where the front of the Disneyland Hotel is, where the current entrance is to downtown Disney, that would be a Westside esplanade and entrance to Disneyland. So, yes, Disneyland and DCA will both have two entrances and two exits. I strongly believe this based on the diagrams that Disney has on the Disneyland Forward website, where you can clearly see entrance portals for both Disneyland and DCA. There are little booths similar to ticketing stations or the current entrance way that Disney has for both Disneyland and DCA. You can see those mirrored in these diagrams that they have for this West Side expansion. So, in Bluesky armchair imagineering, what could come to the Lilo and Stitch and Simba parking lots for Disneyland and DCA? I think one general theme I would really love Disney to buy into is the Pacific Ocean. I think California and Disneyland being located in Southern California um, makes it so that, you know, there's a lot of really interesting culture and atmosphere and environment that could come from exploring the Pacific. And with that, I think um, the kind of mini land framework that the Tokyo Disney Sea Fantasy Springs expansion that opened in 2024. I think that could be inspiration for what could come. And applying a Pacific Ocean theme, I think, could introduce some really key and important franchises in Disney's portfolio that are both lucrative, timely, and also timeless. So, with Disneyland, I would love them to bring a Pacific Islands land to Disneyland. And in a Pacific Islands, I think we could see a Moana island of Motunui and a Lilo and Stitch island of Hawaii. And I think making a Pacific Islands land themed to both Moana and Stitch could be perfect. They would fit perfectly together. You could have each property having their own island tied together by some type of walking bridge. Um, the Moana island of Motunui could be a really extravagant dark ride boat ride similar to the Shanghai Disneyland Pirates of the Caribbean attraction, similar to what could be coming with the Avatar experience at DCA. And then with a Lilo and Stitch Land, I think the obvious attraction would be a Hawaiian roller coaster ride, which kind of the name speaks for itself. I think it would be a really immersive, exciting water roller coaster, something we've never really seen Disney do. An equivalent attraction to this would be what Universal's built in the Isle of Berk How to Train Your Dragon Land at Epic Universe in Orlando with Hiccup's wing gliders. This is an all family attraction that's a water roller coaster, kind of. There are water elements because the roller coaster glides just above the bay that they've constructed. So I think a similar type of attraction that, you know, rolls us through the Hawaiian beach waves and the mountainscapes and a little town on, either Kauai or Hawaii, I think could be tremendous. And then, there could be a flat ride themed to Stitch's Beach Day. I think that could be really fun, and for all families. So, altogether, I think a Pacific Islands themed land, featuring Moana and Stitch, which are two incredibly lucrative brands for Disney. You know, we're just coming off of Moana 2 making well over $1 billion. And with Disney greenlighting Moana 3, I think there's a lot of business reason and just fan excitement in bringing a Moana attraction or a Moana mini land or Moana land to the Disney parks. And I think it would fit perfectly at Disneyland on the west side of the resort in a Pacific Islands themed land. I think that just speaks for itself. And then moving over to the south side of the resort with California Adventure, um, my idea would be to kind of extend the Pacific theme, but instead of Pacific Islands, I would make this a Pacific Adventure land. And what I mean in Pacific Adventure is essentially taking us through the Pacific coast, told through kind of the stories of Disney and Pixar. And so, three of the properties that I think could really work in this scenario would be, um, Inside Out as an entry portal through like a golden gate. This would be similar actually to California Adventure's original entranceway when the park opened before the Buena Vista Street remodel. There was a Golden Gate Bridge entryway to the park. And so I actually think that if we were to have a secondary esplanade and entrance to both Disneyland and DCA, I think a really interesting juxtaposition to a Polynesian based Pacific Islands land at Disneyland would be a Golden Gate entryway to DCA. And with that, I think the Inside Out property fits really well in a San Francisco Golden Gate themed entryway that has a vibe of either the Presidio in San Francisco or the Embarcadero on the waterfront. I think could be a really nice secondary entry portal and a very Pacific California theme still, but just with a NorCal flavor, so to speak. And that facade could house a really terrific Inside Out dark ride. Inside Out obviously is a newer property that's incredibly successful. Inside Out did really well at the box office. Inside Out 2 it became, at the time, the highest grossing animated feature of all time with its box office. So, and yeah, I think there's reason to believe that Pixar will work and begin production on an Inside Out 3 sometime soon in the near future. So, I think Inside Out is a clear winning property for Disneyland to bring to DCA. Um, Another property that would go along the Pacific Adventure California coast theme, I think, would be Finding Nemo. Even though, yes, Finding Nemo is a relatively older property, the first film nearly made $1 billion. The sequel, Finding Dory, which came out in 2016, that made well over $1 billion. There's a new Dory short film that is set to debut with Pixar's 2027 feature Gato, coming in March of 2027. So there's going to be a new, you know, Dory themed short film. I think there's reason to believe, and there has been speculation that Pixar is looking at the Nemo and Dory property for a third entry, for a third, film entry in the future. So I think the Finding Nemo property would be really terrific. It could be themed to a, Carmel by the sea or Santa Barbara esque style California coast city or townscape. You know, in the Finding Dory film, there is a Marine Life Institute location that's heavily featured, and I think that could be a great location for a Nemo based attraction and land in California. Um, you know, whether that attraction takes us under the sea or takes us through the Marine Life Institute, I think there's a lot of possibility with that. And then to kind of bring this whole Pacific Adventure land together, I think between Inside Out, Finding Nemo, and then the third property being The Incredibles would be a really terrific attraction to bring to DCA. So my idea with The Incredibles is to stay kind of true to the concept art that Disney has shared with this Disneyland Forward um, proposal, in that there seems to be some type of volcano featured with a water feature surrounding it. And so I really think that including a volcano specifically, or a volcanic island, makes a lot of sense, because California has a really rich and diverse geography and geology. We have many volcanoes in our state, and I think having an Incredibles themed kind of fantasy esque superhero, volcanic island, similar to what is featured in the first Incredibles film with No Manisan. Whether this is actually a No Manisan island, or a Catalina esque No Manisan island with like a new like Incredibles superhero headquarters, could be really fantastic. This could feature a, you know, really thrilling roller coaster. I know, the first thought with The Incredibles being in DCA is, well, there's already the Incredicoaster on Pixar Pier. And with all of this, I do also want to say that my idea were to be, if they were to bring, like, let's say Inside Out, Finding Nemo, and The Incredibles onto the Simba parking lot, um, I would foresee them doing a renovation of Pixar Pier, and I think a really easy property to replace Pixar with the pier would be Toy Story. You already have Toy Story Mania. I think it would be relatively simple to retheme the Incredicoaster to some type of Toy Story wooden coaster. I think that could fit really well. I think the same could be honestly true for a lot of the attractions, um, such as the Inside Out whirlwind ride, or any of the other attractions that have yet to be rethemed in the Paradise Gardens area surrounding Paradise Bay in DCA. Um, any of those rides could be rethemed to Toy Story. All of them could be, in my opinion, and it would work perfectly. And this is also including the of course, the Coco attraction that's coming to this part of the land. I think the Coco attraction is actually going to be perfectly situated, such that it creates a portal to this new Pacific Adventure land. So if you could imagine walking under the current Incredicoaster tracks, if that were rethemed to Toy Story, you would be walking from the Toy Story pier through Coco and onto the Pacific Adventure, where we would find the Incredibles with some type of incredible volcano, and then moving on, stringing down the coastline to the Marine Life Institute with Finding Nemo, and then finally the Golden Gate with Inside Out. Um, so this is just my general idea of what Disney could bring to the Simba parking lot. Of course, they don't have to bring specifically just Pixar properties. I do, however, think that it would be really nice if these expansions at Disneyland and DCA were themed around kind of more cohesive stories rather than just like one-off mini lands, such like, you know, bringing a villain's land or Zootopia to these areas, which I could foresee happening, but I would prefer for these plots to be kind of more storytelling driven rather than just like, you know, franchise IP driven. So that's why I really do believe that a Pacific Islands at Disneyland with Moana and Lilo and Stitch, and a Pacific Adventure with Inside Out, Finding Nemo, and The Incredibles at Disney California Adventure could be really terrific additions to the, you know, portfolio of Disneyland Resort. So to wrap this up, I just want to briefly mention one of the ongoing expansion projects at Disneyland, is a remodel of their Adventureland. And the reason why I bring this up is because I think it's kind of a good model of how at least I'm thinking about what these future expansions on the Simba lot and the Lilo and Stitch lot could be. So, what Tokyo has revealed is that they're going to be essentially bringing a mini land of The Incredibles themed to Nomanasan with a monorail like roller coaster zooming through the jungle and the mountainscape, along with a wilderness explorer up themed mini land set under the Tepui Mountains, which is very interesting and should be, you know, if it's what I could imagine it would look like in real life, given that there's really spectacular rock work throughout the Tokyo Disney Resort. Um, you know, this could be a really outstanding and magnificent kind of mountainscape and waterfall feature. It's not clear exactly what the attraction would be, but whether there's like a outdoor kind of like jungle um, expedition or if it's an indoor attraction. Um, Regardless, that is very interesting. I would also obviously love an up attraction someday at the Disneyland Resort. I could foresee that potentially coming to maybe Grizzly Peak in DCA, maybe where the Redwood Creek Trail is, or potentially a retheme of Ariel's Undersea Adventure. Taking out that building and replacing it with an up attraction could be interesting. Um, but regardless, between The Incredibles, Up, and then they're rounding out their Adventureland with a Moana boat ride. Um, Kind of looks like a outdoor spinner ride, but set in a lagoon with, you know, boats in the water. So that looks like it could be a really interesting ride. I'm not sure if there's going to be a fourth attraction, but there certainly will be at least three attractions, one based on each property. And so while you know, while the size of the plots for Lilo and Stitch and Simba are certainly bigger than the plot of land that Tokyo is working with in their Adventureland, I think it just gives an idea of what the future at Disneyland and Anaheim could look like, and with Disney California Adventure as well. Those are my thoughts for bringing Moana and Stitch to Disneyland and Inside Out, Finding Nemo, and The Incredibles to DCA. We have a lot of projects to look forward to at the Disneyland Resort, so I can't wait to look forward to all what's to come at Disneyland. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Disnerd Podcast.